Good?
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about acute leukemias then. Again, acute leukemias, they are happening really fast. These blast cells have uncontrolled proliferation, uncontrolled cell division, right? And remember, they're big. And where is this happening? Inside the bone marrow, because that's where you make all your blood products, right? So if you can picture these huge blast cells just dividing inside your bone marrow, you can almost predict the signs and symptoms that we'll get to, okay? What does pancytopenia mean? Pancytopenia. What does that word mean?
It's like all bone marrow?
All, not necessarily bone marrow, but yeah, all cells, right, are small. So pan, like pandemic, right? And cyte, cell, and then penia is always small, right? So a shortage of pretty much everything that is made in the bone marrow, right? As far as blood products go, okay? So why would you have shortage of everything? Again, because you have those blast cells rapidly dividing, and you're making a bunch of blast cells, which means you're not making a bunch of other stuff, okay? So you have pretty much not enough of anything. Now, having said that, when you have these rapidly dividing blast cells, remember I said the blast cells look to most people and a computer, apparently, they kind of look like white blood cells, right? So it's a little weird because if you think about what's happening with leukemia, your whether it's the lymph side or the myeloid side, it kind of doesn't matter at this point, but if you have a bunch of those blast cells that look like white blood cells and they're rapidly dividing, and some of the cardinal things of leukemia is you find that somebody's just severely immunocompromised, right? They're getting all sorts of weird little diseases because they basically don't have an immune system. Why don't they have an immune system? Because you're not making the white blood cells that you're supposed to be making, right? However, if you run a lab test and just a regular CBC and you get the results, somebody's normal white blood cells are going to be like 10,000, give or take, right? Just to kind of give you a little reference. Somebody with a leukemia, it might be 80,000, 180,000. I mean, just ridiculous amounts. And the computer comes back and you're like, what in the world, man? This person has a lot of white blood cells. You think that their immune system is awesome, right? It's fighting something horrible. No, you have a bunch of blast cells masquerading as functional white blood cells. Therefore, really high white blood cell counts, but they're not really white blood cells, are they? They're the blast cells that are just going crazy. Okay? So, why would you have anemia then? Why would you have anemia if you had an acute leukemia?
Because you're not making enough red blood cells.
Yeah, you're not making enough red blood cells, especially if you're on the myeloid side and your myeloblasts are the ones going crazy and not making anything below it, right? Red blood cells are part of that. Now, even if you're on the lymph side, which has nothing to do with the red blood cells, and you're dividing those lymphoblasts over and over and over, it's crowding everything else, so you can't actually make the stuff on the myeloid side. Does that make sense? Okay, so regardless of which side it is, you end up with the same net result, is you end up with anemia in these leukemias. Okay? Neutropenia, what is that referring to?
Shortage of neutrophils?
Yeah, just neutrophils. Shortage of neutrophils. Okay? Again, same reason. Thrombocytopenia is referring to, yeah, shortage of platelets because platelets are thrombocytes, right? Again, for the same reason. Make sense? Okay? This is something you should probably remember. This is your unusual thing. Okay? If you see a kid with Down syndrome that has symptoms similar to what we'll see in a second here, basically flu-like symptoms, but with some other manifestations, skin manifestations, things like that. If you see a kid with Down syndrome, that should be one of those boom red flags about kind of get your hackles on end a little bit, because I can't remember the exact stat, but I think it's something like 10% of people with Down syndrome get leukemia. It's just something huge. I don't remember the exact number, but I just remember it was huge. right? And a huge portion of any population, 10% of it, and that's a lot, right? So that's one of those things where you just kind of get your attention real fast if you see some kid with Down syndrome and you know, it should automatically take your head over to, I wonder if this is leukemia, not just a bad flu or something like that, okay? All right, so we'll move on. And if you look at that now, if you think about leukemia, okay, can you tell me why you might have weight loss, fever, frequent infections? And again, a lot of these answers would be the same for all of these symptoms. That's what you're trying to do, right? Is figure out why. Why would you have these symptoms? And how, if you have these symptoms, does that give you a mental picture of, oh, I might be talking about leukemia in this patient? Okay, so you got a patient with weight loss, fever, frequent infections. Why are you thinking leukemia? What's that have to do with it? I mean, it sounds just like a really bad cold or something, right? Or what frequent infections means they're immunocompromised, right? Okay. Can you see why somebody would have these though? That's the question. So what?
Because if they're anemic, then they have weakness in their muscles and stuff.
Okay.
And they're also, they could have fever and frequent infections because they're not making white blood cells.
Okay. And if you think about somebody who's getting sick a lot, right? And with that goes the fever, of course. What is fever, right? Fever is high metabolism. Metabolism is going crazy, right? You're burning that heat. Heat is energy, right? I mean, literally, heat is energy, right? And you're just having a very high metabolic energy state where you're just going through calories, right? And you're having this fever, and of course it's going to make you lose weight, right? I remember once back when I got the typhoid fever, and it was like 2 weeks, I lost like 25 pounds, right? And I had somebody come in my house for a room, and she's like, oh wow, you look really good. I'm like, well, I lost 25 pounds. Yeah, I look good, but I almost died. But you know what I mean? That kind of energy consumption makes people lose weight, right? So anyway, the same thing here, like you said. And yeah, you kind of threw the muscular weakness in here too. Why muscular weakness? Maybe that goes along with easy shortness of breath. Why?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Why would you have less oxygen?
Because you're trying to breathe more.
Huh? Yeah, you got less red blood cells. Remember our anemia? Less red blood, therefore less oxygen carrying capacity. Of course, you're going to get difficulty breathing with very little exertion, right? You're going to be tired, you're going to be weak, you're going to be lethargic because you don't have enough oxygen in your body because you don't have enough red blood cells in your body, right? You know this stuff, it makes sense, yeah? Okay? How about bone, joint? Bones or joint pain? Any
What's
idea?
happening in your bone marrow?
Yeah, it's happening in your bone marrow. In little kids especially, when they get leukemias, they do complain about that. Their bones hurt. Big old stinking blast cells dividing, taking up so much space in that bone marrow. You can feel the pressure, apparently, just kind of hurt in your bones, right? And like I said, little kids tend to complain about that. Okay. Psychological fatigue, loss of appetite. Why? Why? Fatigue is kind of the same thing we already talked about, because same reason you're weak in your muscles.
Lack of oxygen.
Yeah, you got lack of oxygen, right? Back to that whole anemia thing. Anybody with anemia is going to get that, right? Not exactly sure why the loss of appetite, other than when people get sick in general and they have that kind of fever and night sweats and all that, a lot of people will lose their appetite over that. Not exactly sure why that is, but it happens. Lymph nodes, of course. What's the lymph do? What's the purpose of the lymph? Yeah, fights infections, right? If you have a lot of infections, those lymph nodes are going to be really, really busy, and therefore they swell up. They're full. They're full of white blood cells trying to attack those frequent infections that you're having, so if it really swells it up. Okay? Spleen, liver, why is that large? Why would you get hepatosplenomegaly with leukemia?
They're recycling our blood cells or just
Yeah,
blood clotting.
they're supposed to do that, right? They're supposed to recycle red blood cells. And even though you have less red blood cells because you have anemia, the red blood cells, it's not just the red blood cells, right? The spleen and the liver, they know there's something weird going on, and they're just destroying these ridiculous cells that are out there, right? So they're very, very, very busy. Just keep it at that. Okay? Okay, so this part is a little bit different, but let's think about that. I don't know why, by the way, night sweats, that's a thing when people get sick. I mean, you know that, you've been sick, right? Why is it at night that you seem to have worse fever and night sweats as opposed to during the day?
Because your body's resting and like the immune system like spikes. And that's
Yeah, maybe that's true.
so
Is that true? Do you know that, or you guess?
Sometimes that's like burning the infection off.
That actually makes sense, doesn't it? Right? You're kind of in your rest and digest mode, and the immune system's like, let's go. That may be true. That's cool. In either case, let's talk about easy bleeding, bruising, the same purplish patches on skin. Okay? To start with, let me kind of, why would you have easy bleeding and bruising with leukemia?
Decrease platelet counts.
Yeah, decreased platelet count, right? Of course, if you have less platelets, you're gonna, all those little microvascular bleeds that you would normally get from just living, right? And usually our platelets just cut them off and you don't have these bruises and everything. You're like, oh, wow, hit my elbow. You know, okay, fine. No big deal.